Okay, why don't we go ahead? Okay, welcome and welcome back to some people. And if you were here last time, please leave your gazoos at the door. And today we have Wendy Martinez, and she's a senior mathematician at the Census Bureau. And she's also 2020 ASA president. She's going to talk about ethics and data. And just as a side note, if you look at the ASA ethics guidelines, they're mostly a guide to good collaboration and working with people. So they're worth taking a look at. So we've changed the procedures a little bit. We have you all on mute. So please raise your hand if you have a question, and we'll quickly unmute you to ask. So welcome, Wendy. Welcome again.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Ching, for setting this up and for being patient with the whole process and figuring things out. So we will see what happens this week, and hopefully we won't have any Zoom issues. So I'm assuming everybody could see my slides okay. And oh gosh, my computer's froze here. Okay, there we go. All right, so thanks, Mark, for the introduction. Also, as Mark said, I recently joined the Census Bureau. Formerly, I was at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And I'm officially off the clock for this hour because I didn't really want to go through and switch all my slides and put the Census logo on there. I'm only been at Census for 4 months, so I'm still trying to figure out all of the the procedures and the policies. So I thought, just to be safe, let me just do this off the clock. But also, just to be safe, I want to specify that the usual disclaimer that any opinions, etc., are mine and not the Census Bureau. So some of you who were here last week, you already heard about the menti.com. And what I want you to do, you don't often hear this in a talk, they're usually saying, put your cell phones away. But what I'd like you to do is go to your, if you have a smartphone or maybe an iPad or something, or even another tab on your browser, and just type in menti.com, because as we go through the talk, I am going to ask you to participate. I was thinking later I could have done this maybe through Zoom, but I'm not quite that good at using Zoom in that way. So last time when I did this, the first question I asked everybody was, where are you located right now? I'm not going to ask that question. Instead, I'm going to ask you this one, which is, how do you define data ethics? So let me see, I'll have to switch this.
Do we need a code or something, or maybe I missed that?
No, the code, we haven't done that yet. I'm trying, oh, there we go. All right, so let's see. Oh yeah, here it is. All right, let me do this. And wish I could get rid of some of these things. All right, hopefully you can see the code. I can't really see it because I have stuff in front of it, but Mark, can you see the code up there?
Yeah, 8602-3116.
Great, thank you. So I want you to, usually I ask this question later in the presentation, but I'm just gonna try to, I guess it's kind of like when you have somebody, you're giving a class or something, and you ask them to sort of do like a pre-assessment. That's what this is. Oh, fantastic. I'm already getting some some answers. All right, so we'll come back to this. And oh good, it went to away from full screen. All right, so as I'm talking, if you would go there, enter that code that Mark mentioned, and then enter your definition of data ethics. So I sort of became more aware of this topic in early 2019, and I had attended a ASA conference on statistical practice, and I was chairing a panel session on this topic, and that was a real eye-opener for me. And I'm hoping that this seminar today will serve the same purpose for you. And as with a lot of things, once you become aware of it, you sort of see it everywhere. And these are kind of areas in 2019 where I just was encountering this idea of data ethics. Now at the CSP panel, some of the panelists gave some stories, and it was those stories that I said were, kind of opened my eyes. So I'm going to start with some stories also. So this one is something that was published in the news in the fall of 2019. So I think it was insurance companies had asked some analysts to develop models that would predict what patients might benefit from having some sort of intervention medically with respect to their health. So in other words, if a person is likely to suffer from maybe diabetes in the future or high blood pressure, what could we do? What could they do earlier in their lives to help prevent something more serious happening to them? So the folks building the models, they excluded race from the list of predictors, but they did use future costs to the healthcare system. And the model was supposed to sort of predict and then rank the type of people or who were going to have a high cost to the health system in the future. The issue is that, well, of course, cost is not race neutral. And it turns out that minority patients have fewer costs to the healthcare system than white patients with the same medical conditions. And this could be due to different reasons. Maybe they have less medical insurance, so that high cost wasn't captured, or maybe they don't visit the doctor as much because of cultural issues, or maybe they have just fewer options for healthcare. So one of the things that I found a bit interesting about this example was that the way they found out that there was this sort of bias in the model was that somebody took the scores and they mapped them spatially. So where were the patients and what were their rankings, and they found that the highest scores were concentrated in affluent, predominantly white suburbs. And so to me, this was an interesting application of kind of spatial data analysis or visualization to show that there was this issue happening. The other, somebody mentioned in one of the articles too that I found a bit concerning was that they said, well, it's not really a problem that there's a bias in the model like this because we can just account for it and it's all good. And I want you to just kind of think about that. I have a problem with that idea or that statement. I don't have any sort of proof of that, but it's something that I'm not very comfortable with. And it's actually something that Amazon is not comfortable with either, I can say, because they experienced this issue with one of their tools that they tried to build. So what Amazon was trying to do is they said, well, we get a lot of resumes. So how can we sort of screen the resumes so that we only give the hiring managers or hiring officials the top ranked candidates. Well, so they built a tool or model that would try to rank them 1 to 5 stars. And they found out that the rankings or the ratings were not gender neutral. And that's because, of course, we're using, when we build our models, we're using data from the past, right? And the data from the past sort of encodes social, cultural biases, right? That then sort of get perpetuated into the future. And that's what happened here. Of course, the data came from the previous 10-year period where it was predominantly males in the tech field. But what was interesting also about this is that they tried to get rid of the bias, and they couldn't do it, so they ended up just scrapping the whole thing. Now, this story example was one that I was told about at the CSP, and he's been mentioned quite a bit with as an example with problems where we have black box algorithms or models. And so Glenn Rodriguez, he came up for parole. He was flagged as high risk using a model or software that was based on a trade secret algorithm. So he went before the parole board, he was flagged high risk, and then they refused his parole. But it turns out when you look at his record, it was exemplary. I mean, he had no disciplinary actions, did a lot of service work. But the problem here was that he had no recourse to kind of understand what was happening. He couldn't protest it because it was all protected by a trade secret. But he was able to kind of talk to some fellow inmates, and it turns out that there was one question where I think it was asked of the guards, like, do you think this person is going to offend again or not? And he was, for some reason, rated yes, he's like a danger or something. So that one variable really affected his score. If you switch that, it went from very high risk to very low risk. This is a recent article about the issue with facial recognition. The story and the example in this article, there was a man, and he was accused of, I think, shoplifting or something, and they arrested him. He spent 6 months in jail, and it turns out that at the time of the incident, he was actually not even in the area, and he was at the hospital where his child was being born. And it turns out that a lot of some police jurisdictions or offices are using facial recognition models and software, but they're not required to tell the defendant why they're being charged with it, or that they have this, that this is sort of the evidence or the witness against them. So again, it's like I don't know if it's really a trade secret or not, but they're not required to tell them. But it turns out that his defense attorney was told about it, and he ended up just taking a plea deal because he just wanted to get out of jail. I really recommend that you take a look at this article. It has a lot of examples of issues with using machine learning tools for policing, to try to predict areas where there's going to be crime. And there's another example in this one that has to do with the image recognition. I think they said they looked at where they had 104 examples where they were trying to match up who this belonged to this image, and only 2 of them ended up correct. So that's not a very good number. So going back to hiring, some companies have developed and or are using artificial intelligence to kind of do an initial screening of candidates. And these, they would scan the face of the candidate as they're talking or answering questions. And they would measure things about, you know, how is the person smiling, where are their eyes, what's their, how are they speaking, and it would give them an employability score. Now, this is also an example of a proprietary tool, and I think it's also, we could call it a black box algorithm or model. Because it's based on multiple neural networks, deep learning. And it turns out that one of the companies that, I don't remember whether it was they were the ones developing it, but they said, because a candidate kind of complained, I guess, and they wanted to know how this model was working. And they said, well, we don't know, we don't even understand it. So that's a little bit concerning to me that, you know, when they can't even explain what's going on, you know, how does that help with maybe people using the model or candidates that are maybe facing discrimination or something based on it? Okay. And what about training data? This I kind of like to, I wish I could see everybody out there, because I want to ask you, how many of you have sort of smart sensors or Alexa or whatever the Google one is? I think it's Echo or something. When I first heard about this, I was a bit shocked, but then I realized, well, yeah, that is how that has to work. Turns out that, you know, when you have the Amazon Alexa, these sensors are sitting there listening to you, or listening to what's going on around them and recording it. The humans, at least when this article was published, they would listen to it, transcribe it, annotate it to then create training data. And I was a bit shocked that, wow, my Alexa's just sitting here listening to me. But that has to be the case, right? Because the sensor's waiting for somebody to say Alexa so that it could do something. So it's always there, kind of listening and waiting for us to say something. So to me, that's a little bit scary. Driverless cars. This was something else that somebody brought up at the CSP, and I never really thought about it until that time. But I think now driverless cars are becoming a little more, not necessarily common, but they're certainly out there. But if you think about it, who's programming what those vehicles are supposed to do when something happens? And if you think about who's a stakeholder in how this car is going to react, well, you have the car manufacturer. They might have one objective. You have the insurance companies. You have the driver, you have pedestrians or drivers in other cars. All of these stakeholders, I guess, have different objectives or desires, like how a car would behave in certain situations. So a team at MIT, they developed something called the moral machine, and they tried to get a handle on this question about, well, what would we want this driverless car to do in the case of an accident? So if we assume that an accident is going to happen, what's going to happen? What choice would we make? And so here's the situation. On the left right here, this little picture, here's a crosswalk. There's some pedestrians. There's a barrier here. As we're looking at it on the right, and the car's heading for the pedestrians. Oh, also, I never really noticed that, but there's little other people in the car here besides the driver. I'll put that in quote, little driver. So would you have the car go forward? Would you program the car to hit the pedestrians, or would have to swerve, hit the barrier, and then, you know, something would happen to the people in the car? So you can go to the Moral Machine at MIT. This is their latest screenshot. So you could actually, you know, take it yourself. I think you can even design your own scenarios. I've never really looked at this AI cartoons. I need to do that and see what that's all about. All right, so the Moral Machine, though, there's data on all of this that you can get to and play with if you want. But they published articles in 2018 in Nature that you could read. And at that time, they had 13 scenarios similar to what I just described, where someone would die. So it's not that, well, if I hit the barrier, maybe I wouldn't die if I'm in the car, but you know, somebody is going to die. And they had a mix of situations, age, wealthy or not, lots of people or few people, and so forth. And as you will see, it does depend on our culture, country, age, and so on. But in general, people did spare humans over pets and groups of people over individuals. They kind of grouped the responses to the scenarios based on their country. And so here they have what it's called the moral compass. And you know, so you can see here the pinky areas are the Western, blue is Eastern, and then green is Southern. And so here we have just kind of some of the preferences that in general people had based on their region. All right, so let's see if this will work. Oh, good, we have some definitions. We'll come back here. Let me see. Okay. I would like you to go to, oops, hopefully it's this one. Yes, all right. So hopefully you can see the code. I'm going to leave the code up there for just a moment. Unfortunately, well, maybe I can go away from. Okay, hopefully this is the right code. 4394200. And just go in there and say whether you would hit the person or the barrier. And keep in mind that I can't tell who's responding, so your identity is safe. Okay. We'll come back and look and see what people have said. Now, we'll come back later and also see how you defined data ethics. See if it matches what I'm about to talk about. So ethics itself is a branch of philosophy. It's the study of right and wrong. It's a set of moral principles that sort of guide our behavior. And so it's not the laws or the regulations or the rules, although sometimes those are maybe based on a culture's ethics. And as you can see, like I said, it's the set of principles that govern our behavior, and our behavior and those principles depend on different aspects of ourselves. So like the country, the culture, our age, gender, and so forth, as we saw with the moral machine. But what about data ethics itself? Well, data ethics builds on over 30 years of computer ethics. So it started with computer ethics, and then it became information ethics. So it's kind of another level of abstraction, and then data ethics. And I really like in my view, I like the idea that we should focus on data ethics because the data are foundational to what we do as statisticians, analysts, data scientists, right? So much of what we do in our lives starts with data. And as I go through the rest of the talk, I also talk about data science ethics, ethics in artificial intelligence, big data ethics. There is a lot of overlap, in my view, there between these areas. In some cases, they might be the same. So we'll see information from different sources with respect to these areas. But in my view, they're all related to the issue of data and ethics. Now, there was a special issue of a journal, and the link is down there. And it's open access, at least it was. And it's interesting because it's actually a philosophy journal. And there's a special issue on data ethics, but one author, a group of authors defined the 3 axes of data ethics. First is the ethics of data, and that has to do with the collection of it. So do we really need to collect that data? Issues with trust and transparency. This ethics of algorithms, I think, is, in my view, what we've been talking about already. And then we have the ethics of practice. And in my opinion, this has to do somewhat of well, confidentiality, keeping, not letting people know the identity that corresponds to say an observation. But then this issue of secondary use. So somebody might collect some data for a particular purpose, but then it could be used by somebody else for something that's bad. But one of the, just to be honest, I'm a bit confused between this ethics of practice and the ethics of data. In my view, they don't seem to be completely separate, or I guess orthogonal. But I guess I'll just say too that you could think of certain cases maybe, or applications or something where you might have some aspect of, so you might have like a point in 3-dimensional ethics space where all of these things come into play. All right, here's another definition. This is from the UK government. They said data ethics is an emerging branch of applied ethics, which describes the value judgments and approaches we make when generating, analyzing, and disseminating data. I like what they mention, technology, because we've talked about smart sensors. So I think accounting for the technology that sort of either results from the data or produces the data is important. And this fact that you have to take a holistic approach. So you also have to look at computing and information. This is a little bit dated. I like this presentation. It gets at what Mark brought up earlier about the ASA professional guidelines. And he argues this because he said, well, do we need to have something about data ethics? Because we do have professional guidelines as statisticians or scientists or government employees. Do we have to have something specific for data? And he argues for that. He says, yes, we do need to have that. And I agree. Ireland, I really love this statement right here I have. It says, it is about understanding complicated, hard to predict social phenomena emerging from complicated, hardly understood technologies. So I think this brings up several things. First, there's this lack of understanding. We struggle with that. It's complicated. And that they bring together this idea of social issues or benefits, as well as the technology again. And here's the other thing, I get back to that third axis of data ethics, the practice of it, which is we have to be anticipatory. So we should think about, if I'm collecting this data and my heart's in the right place about why I'm collecting it, I want to do something good for society, but somebody could come along and take that data and use it for not for good. And I do think that this is difficult to do because we can't always think about oh, Mark raise his hand?
I did, but I can unmute myself. So you're saying we need separate data ethics, partly because just the issues, like our ethics for the statistical guidelines are, working together in good ethical collaboration, but data brings up all these other issues. And you're also saying it has to be anticipatory, just like the example we had of the driverless car, where they're saying, well, if we did have an accident, what do we, let's figure out what we need to do. So I don't know, I guess, could you explain a little more?
Yeah, and we will get into, I'm going to bring up, the ASA guidelines, because they do have, one of their principles does have to do with data ethics, but I think we need to be more, oh gosh, what's the right word? Intentional about it. And I will talk about the Royal Statistical Society, and they are very upfront about the issue of data ethics, so much so that they have a section on data ethics. So I think that's what I would like to see more of. And when I this is just my view about anticipatory, is that somebody could, I could collect data on, say there's a neighborhood that's has some particular ethnic or racial makeup, and so, but then I want to do a survey or collect data about the residents in that area, because I want to make sure that they have opportunities for medical care, social services, things like that. But somebody in the future could come along and take that data and use it to discriminate or something. So that's, I guess, what I'm trying to get at with being anticipatory, is just kind of thinking about, how could somebody do something bad with the data in the future. All right, there is another, here's another website too that was also a bit of an eye-opener for me, because, I'm kind of at the, I want to build the model and do the analysis, visualize the results. I sort of forget about this whole data life cycle, that, you have the funding, why are you doing this study or collecting the data, and so on, through this whole life cycle, that we need to consider ethics, data ethics in each step of that cycle. And this website right here, We All Count, is fantastic. So I encourage you to go there and check it out. Okay, let me just see how people defined data ethics. Okay. All right, by the way, I'm going to put these results in the slides when I give them. Let's see. All right, so some people would, some people wouldn't. This was the car one. All right, let me see how people defined, let's see, I want to see the definitions. All right. Oops, that didn't work. All right, hopefully you can see it. that's good. That pertains to the moral means of the data life cycle. Respect the truth and be considerate. I like that one. I haven't heard that before. Collecting and or analyzing data in a manner that directly addresses the agreed upon inquiry at hand. Good. Yep, I like this one. All of these are fantastic. How one should properly act, the planning, sampling, collecting, etc. of data that does not hide any potential bias and seeks out to find its own bias. Oh, interesting. Great. So I'm going to kind of incorporate those. So let's look at what some organizations are doing with respect to data ethics. And this one is called, this group is called Data for Democracy. And they have these, 5 principles over here on the left: fairness, openness, reliability, trust, and social benefit. All of those should be considered. This is a site called Data and Society. They bring up the issue of data-centric technologies again, and how that's important. I really want to emphasize this website. It's called dataethics.eu. This is a little older screenshot. I've got a newer one, but and this is in Europe, but it's global, but they have a lot of tools. So I'm going to give you some other websites that have tools, because it's okay to talk, we should talk about data ethics, but how do we address that? And I love the idea of having tools to help us do so. They call themselves a think do tank, hence the tools. They're not just saying, oh, we should do this, but how can we make it happen? So these are their principles. They talk about, one of them is who benefits from the data processing. I would like to add to that to say, well, we should also think about who might be harmed by the data processing. There's this issue of who controls the data, and we're going to see these 2 principles over and over again: transparency and accountability. Here's a recent screenshot. I just took this last week. So here you can see the tools that they have, and it looks like now they're doing research in this area. So I might check that out and urge you to do that also. This is the January-February issue of the IMS Bulletin. David Hand is a well-known statistician, data scientist, and this is several years old, of course, but it's got some really good information in there, as well as some references that you might check out, and it's available online. He's a really good writer too, so it'll be easy to understand. Now, I've also already talked about the kind of the definition of data ethics from the United Kingdom, and as I said, I think I maybe said that I think they're at the forefront of this, both as a National Statistical Office and the Royal Statistical Society. Here's the principles that the UK government mentions, and again, this idea of transparency and accountability. Understand the limitations of the data. I think that's always important too. This is something that was commissioned, a document commissioned by the European Commission, and here is a link to it. I think this is kind of archived, so it might be a little difficult to grab onto it. But Mark mentioned earlier, the ASA. What's the ASA doing about this, and maybe other professional associations? Well, one I looked at was the ISI, and they do have a committee on ethics, but from what I can tell, it's professional ethics again. How do we act as statisticians, data scientists, and so on? I don't think that they've really addressed data ethics, but I could be wrong. The ASA has just recently, I think this year, I guess, published a revised set of ethical guidelines for statistical practice. And as Mark mentioned, they do tend to be more along the lines of how do we work with others, how do we work with the research subjects or the stakeholders or our teams and so on. But they have had, and I don't think they changed this, the second one is called the integrity of data and methods. And so there's two items in this one. It says the ethical statistical practitioner seeks to understand and mitigate known or suspected limitations, defects, or biases in the data or methods, and then communicates that to the stakeholders. But that does get at some of what we've been talking about. But like I said, I would like to see this be a little more intentional. The Royal Statistical Society has put this at the forefront. This is kind of an old screenshot, but I kind of like it because it's easy to sort of see what they're talking about. But they have a special interest group, which is now a section on data ethics. All right, so it's right out front as an issue. And down here, there's a link. The second link is the link to their section on data ethics. But then they also published a manifesto, a data manifesto. And I just noticed today that it was data, evidence, decisions. So I kind of liked that. But I did like how they said this sort of bumper sticker, if you would, that says data is a driver of prosperity, a revolutionary resource that is transforming the nature of economic activity, the capability that differentiates successful from unsuccessful societies. I guess I would have reworded that because I don't consider data a capability, but I would say the capability that we have as a nation to kind of use the data in an ethical way is what's going to differentiate us as a successful society. There was 10 items in their manifesto. The first 5, in my opinion, were focused on the government statistics. So this is at their official statistics. So they should be at the heart of policy debate and so on. So as Washington Statistical Society, many of us work with or in the federal government, so we could relate to all of these. And then the second 5 are more, I think, focused on the public. So, how can we train the nation, shape the public conversation about how data is used, misinformation, and how can we protect the public? IEEE is another association. They have a document about AI ethics or ethics in action, and you could get the document here at this link. When I was checking out all the links for this talk, when I went to there, they had sort of like a banner or something, and this was on the banner. It says they have a document on the voice of the artist in the age of the algorithm, ethically aligned design for artists. And I was really intrigued by that because I've been taking classes in art history, so I've become really focused on art, and so I'm intrigued by what all that means. So if you're intrigued by that, check it out. But here's sort of a summary of their principles. Again, we see transparency, accountability, and this idea of trying to guard against all potential misuses, which of course is difficult to do, but at least if we're aware of it and it's part of the conversation, then that's helpful. All right, maybe this will be the last Menti thing I do, because I do like to ask people this. All right, hopefully this is the right one. Yes, I would like you to all right. Hopefully you could see this. I think you could just try to rank these. Which one is most important to you? And, you know, so 1 through 6, which one is most important? And hopefully you can see the little code.
Code will be in the chat too.
Oh, yay. Wow, you're really good at the at this. Thank you. Let's see this guy. All right, there's legislation. What are the governments doing about data? Well, I'm pretty sure most of us know by now through the apps on our phone and so on that Europe had a GDPR, which is a general data protection regulation, and others have sort of followed suit to pass similar laws. But essentially, it is to protect data rights, specifically the right to be informed, the right to object, the right for access, the right to have it fixed, and the right to have it be forgotten. All important and yet maybe difficult things to make happen. Here's a website that I encourage you to go to. And I'll now give Mark and Ching the slides so they could post them. But this is, because this is a screen capture from earlier in the year, and I checked it out this past week just to see if it changed, and it had, and it has improved. So I would just like you to go here and see what countries have legislation, what countries don't have any data or no legislation protecting data. And but there certainly is a global effort to improve data protection, privacy, and data ethics. And I found out about that website through this document from Deloitte. It's online at this, you can find it at this link. It's 2020, but that's not too long ago. Anyway, they have a whole chapter on data ethics. So you might check that out. All right, so I talked about, we heard about the UK and what they're doing with data ethics, and I mentioned, I think, Ireland, but what about the United States? What are we doing? Well, we do have a federal data strategy, and it says that the mission of the federal data strategy, is to fully leverage the value of federal data for mission, service, and the public good by guiding the federal government and practicing ethical governance, conscious design, and a learning culture. And in particular, I want to just mention two items here. One is the data skills catalog, and another was the data ethics framework. There was a federal data strategy action plan, and two of the actions are fulfilled here. And just, I want to point out here this this framework for data ethics that you can check out. They have, I think, some case studies there that might help you, learn more and delve into this a bit more. I love this. The trying to get some of this out of the way, but this is the UN Secretary. They have a data strategy, and this is a data strategy for action by everyone, everywhere. And I can't read the third one because let me see. Oh, good. All right. By everyone, everywhere. So I said I really like to focus on tools too, that I think I want to sort of equip people to do something about this as they go through their careers. So here are a few. This is We All Count again. This is a data set bias assessment tool. And I think I haven't really tried it, but I'm going to in the near future. But I think you can give the data set as well as if the survey, if you have survey data. So if you can give them if you use a copy of the survey tool, then that helps with the assessment. Here's one from, I don't know what group did this one, but it's called the Ethics and Algorithms Toolkit. And I like this banner thing down here. The question isn't whether you should, but when will you start? So another tool I'm going to check out. The Canadian government, they have an algorithmic impact assessment tool. So you might look at that. This is for the responsible use of AI. Now this one, it's not really a tool per se, but you know, if you're kind of interested in this topic, check it out. They send a weekly email every Friday, and sometimes they have, they have AI or ethics, data ethics things happening in the news or in the tech world or the data world, that, with articles, or they sometimes have jobs. So you check that out. It's only once a week, and you can sometimes learn some good things. So that's more of a learning thing. I'm gonna let's see how I'm gonna skip these two. This one just has to do with sort of a story or an application to get us thinking about DNA, and if ever you've submitted your DNA for one of those genealogy databases or companies, how are they using your DNA and for what, and what permission did you give? This gets us thinking about, well, if somebody has collected data either through web scraping without the permission, or hacking or something, and they post it out there for anybody to use, is it still ethical for us to use it? Or did they violate ethics because well, the data's out there, but was it ethical for them to scrape it and then make it publicly or available to just everyone? So I'm going to conclude with just some stories that you might want to look at. This is a somewhat recent one, I think maybe like this past year. Are we automating racism, or are we automating bias? So you could look at that. Those of you who have Netflix, there is a documentary called Coded Bias, and there was a young woman, Joy, I can't pronounce her name, but anyway, she was a MIT Media Lab researcher, and she uncovered the issues with facial recognition technology. And we've kind of talked about that already with some of our examples of issues with our data. So that looks like it's it. Let me go back to our Menti and see what people said with the, okay, transparency, reliability, trust, fairness, privacy, social benefit. That's fantastic. That's probably what I would have said too. All right, let me see if I can never figure out how to get to the next slide. Oh, here we go. All right, think ahead. I like that. Can't be ignored. Data users, creators, and analysts should be aware of data ethics. I love that one. It's important to consider before even planning data collection. I agree with that one too. Yep, think ahead. Fantastic. Okay, great. Well, that is all I have. I guess we have a couple minutes for comments or questions. I see some chat here. Oh, Sam is on here.
Yeah, and he had some thoughts about the moral machine, so maybe he would like to know what to address about that. So
Yeah, I think that might be she's.
Yes.
Yes.
Hello.
Because I know Sam very well.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm very curious about the Moral Machine website. And now this was my first time looking at it just now. But I'm wondering, is it supposed to be like deciding how algorithms should be trained based on what people think overall?
I don't think they went into that aspect of it. My impression is that they were trying to say, well, if you're talking about ethics and morals, that really depends on the culture, the country, other demographic, variables. So how do people think about these situations, and how would they act? So I think they were just trying to get at the fact that it's not going to be exact, that how we would answer that question about how would you program the car. I mean, I don't have an answer to that. My preference, my reaction would be to freeze.
Yeah.
So
well, it was interesting to me because I did, I flipped through some of the, I like tested, myself, like what would I do? And I didn't really realize that there was a text description as well. And so when it got to the end, it was like you favored high status people over low status people, or you favored quote fit people over quote large people. And I just think that that's a really dangerous distinction to be thinking about in these scenarios, and also to then teach to a machine. Yeah, so I was just really concerned when I saw that. So I'm just wondering if, it doesn't seem like the best, the most moral machine, I guess.
Yeah, but so that's kind of interesting. You're sort of adding another level of assessing morality, right? The morality of the moral machine. Yeah, I guess I would encourage you to read the Nature articles.
Oh, you mean the ones behind the paywall?
I thought they were. Well, I will see. I probably have your email. I'll see.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I'll see if I can get them.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Because I thought they were just open.
No, I wasn't able to get to them.
Okay, well, I'll see. I'll see if I can get to them. I know I used to be able to get to them. So yeah, and maybe in certain cultures, whether somebody is like higher standing or something, I don't know how you would determine that, but that might be important to them. But Sam, you're somebody who really loves to look at data, so they do have the data that's available.
Yeah, that maybe I'll take a look at that. That's pretty interesting.
So I don't know what you could figure out from it, but other than what they've already published, but that was several years ago. So, but yeah, very, very interesting.
yeah,
thanks, Wendy.
We're at the hour, but we can, if people want, we could continue a little longer. And I think Henry had a question.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Wendy and King, for wonderful session. I learned a lot, and it's very relevant to what I'm currently thinking about around agile and data science. So you gave me a lot of things to think about. So I look forward to the slides. But my question particularly is about when you went through all the different websites and you looked at the different attributes, and the two that kept reoccurring, at least as I saw it, was transparency, accountability. But then understanding limitations is also, of course, increasingly important to us to let other people know. But you had then also highlighted a website about art, and you mentioned something about that this is an area you're interested in playing in. And one of the ones they had recommended was specify competency for use. My question is this two-part of the US federal data strategy around this? And how are we defining the key features for competency in the US government around data?
I don't know if we actually are. That's kind of interesting because I'm wondering, so to me, competency means, you know, training and that type of thing. So there is this issue with, you know, this idea that we need to train those who work in the government agencies so that they do have the competencies, so you know they do have the understanding and the skills to manage data as a strategic asset. So, and it's not just those of us who are, you know, statisticians and data scientists who are doing the model building and so forth, but it's those the decision makers and the policy makers too, right? That, and I think they need to understand some of these issues, so they're asking the right questions of those who are doing the analyses. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Okay, let's see. Thank you, Henry. I don't see any other questions. And it's after the hour. So Wendy, thank you very much for an interesting talk, and it'll provide a lot of discussion for all of us, I'm sure. And I guess we could give her a virtual round of applause. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. And here's my contact information. You know, feel free to reach out. And yes, and because I don't have all the answers. I don't have many answers. I just think it's important for us to you know, to have a conversation and to be aware of these things, and then we can learn from each other, because I'm always learning new things about this whole area. So yeah, hopefully you'll continue the conversation, and I will get the slides to Mark and Ching, and so they could get them posted.